They say humiliation leaves a sound in the room long after the laughter fades, and that night at my mother's wedding, I heard it echoing in my chest with every forced smile I gave. The hall was filled with soft golden lights, expensive flowers, and guests who looked like they belonged to a different world than the one I grew up in. My mother stood glowing in her ivory dress beside the man she had chosen to marry, Victor Hale. To everyone else, he was charming, confident, and successful. To me, he was the man who had looked down on me from the moment he entered our lives, the man who thought my silence meant weakness. I stood near the back tables, wearing a simple suit I had chosen carefully, not too flashy, not too plain. I didn't want attention. I had promised my mother I would be there for her, no matter how uncomfortable it felt. She had begged me weeks earlier, her hands shaking as she said, "Please, just come. I don't want to start this new chapter without you." I loved her too much to refuse, even though I knew what was coming. Victor had never missed a chance to remind me that I was not doing much with my life. He loved to talk about his job, his achievements, the people he knew. He loved even more to ask me what I did, then nod slowly with that condescending half smile when I answered vaguely. I learned early on that the less I said, the less ammunition I gave him. The mocking started during the reception, right after dinner. The guests were relaxed, glasses half full, laughter flowing easily. Victor stood up with his champagne glass raised and cleared his throat. "I just want to say a few words," he announced. My stomach tightened. I felt it before it happened, the way you feel a storm before the first drop of rain. He began by praising my mother, talking about destiny and second chances. People smiled, clapped softly. Then his eyes drifted toward me. "And of course," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth, "I should mention my new stepson." A few heads turned in my direction. I felt every gaze like a spotlight. "He's quiet," Victor continued, chuckling. "Very quiet. The thinker type, I suppose. Still figuring things out." Laughter rippled through the room. Not everyone can be ambitious, right? Someone has to keep expectations realistic. More laughter, louder this time. I saw my mother's smile falter for just a second before she forced it back into place. She didn't say anything. She never did when Victor made these little comments. Maybe she thought it was harmless. Maybe she thought I didn't mind. She was wrong. Victor raised his glass again. But hey, as long as he learns something from watching hardworking people, maybe he'll turn out just fine. He laughed, and the room followed. I kept my face calm, my expression neutral. Inside, something cold and steady settled over me. This wasn't anger. Anger is loud. This was resolve. After the toast, Victor walked over to me, still riding the high of the laughter. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "No hard feelings, kid," he said quietly, though loud enough for the people nearest us to hear. "Just a little joke. You know how it is. Maybe one day you'll understand what real work looks like." I nodded slowly. "Maybe," I replied. He smirked and walked away, already turning his attention back to the guests who mattered to him. To Victor, I was invisible again. The truth was, I had understood real work for a long time. I had understood sacrifice, risk, and patience. I just never talked about it. Not to him. Not to anyone in that room. Years earlier, when my mother was struggling to pay bills after my father died, I learned what it meant to survive quietly. I worked small jobs, saved every dollar, and taught myself skills late at night while others slept. I failed, more times than I could count, but each failure taught me something. By the time Victor entered our lives, I had already built something of my own, something growing steadily in the background while he was too busy looking down to notice. As the night went on, I watched Victor mingle, shaking hands, laughing loudly, introducing himself as if the room belonged to him. He loved attention. He loved being seen as the successful one. What he didn't know was that I recognized the logo on his company badge the first time I saw it months ago. I remembered it because I had signed the acquisition papers myself. The company he worked for, the one he bragged about constantly, was now a subsidiary of a holding firm I owned quietly through layered investments. I had never visited the offices. I didn't need to. I had a team for that. Victor was just another mid-level manager in a company that answered, ultimately, to me. I hadn't planned to reveal anything that night. I truly hadn't. I wanted to get through the wedding, hug my mother, and leave. But humiliation has a way of changing plans. Later in the evening, as dessert was being served, Victor found me again, this time with a small group of his colleagues. "There he is," he said, gesturing toward me with his fork. "The philosopher." The group laughed politely. "Guys, this is my stepson. Still finding his path." Maybe you can give him some advice about climbing the ladder. One of the men smiled awkwardly. What line of work are you in? He asked me. I took a slow sip of water before answering. Ownership, I said simply. Victor burst out laughing. See, great sense of humor too, he said, waving his hand dismissively. He means aspirations. I looked at Victor then, really looked at him, and realized something important. He didn't see people. He saw reflections of himself, measured only by status and noise. And tonight, in front of everyone who mattered to him, he had decided I was beneath him. I set my glass down gently. Actually, I said calmly, I meant ownership. The laughter around us faded into an uneasy silence. Victor's smile stiffened. All right, he said, lowering his voice. Enough games. I met his eyes, unflinching. Hale Solutions, I continued, watching his expression carefully. The logistics firm you manage operations for. It reports to Northbridge Holdings. One of Victor's colleagues frowned slightly. Yes, that's correct, he said slowly. I founded Northbridge, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Victor stared at me as if I had spoken in another language. That's not funny, he said, his voice tight. I pulled my phone from my pocket and unlocked it, scrolling calmly. I agree, I replied. I turned the screen toward him, showing the corporate profile, my name listed where it mattered, signatures he would recognize. I don't joke about business. The color drained from his face. One of his colleagues took a sharp breath. Another looked between us, suddenly very interested in the tablecloth. Victor swallowed. This must be some kind of misunderstanding, he said, though the certainty was gone from his voice now. I smiled slightly, not with triumph, but with clarity. No, I said. It's just something you never asked about. Across the room, my mother was watching us, confusion written across her face. I met her eyes and gave her a small, reassuring nod. This wasn't about hurting her. It never was. This was about truth finally standing up in a room that had mistaken silence for insignificance. Victor opened his mouth to speak again, but no words came out. For the first time since I had known him, he looked small, exposed, and unsure of his place. And that was only the beginning. The silence that followed felt heavier than the laughter that had filled the room minutes earlier. Victor's colleagues exchanged looks that said more than words ever could. One by one, they murmured excuses and drifted away, suddenly remembering urgent conversations elsewhere. The circle around us dissolved, leaving Victor and me standing face to face under the warm lights of the reception hall. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You think this is funny? He hissed. Trying to embarrass me at my own wedding. I didn't raise my voice. You embarrassed yourself, I said calmly. I didn't ask you to mock me. I didn't ask you to make me a joke. His jaw tightened. If this is some kind of bluff. It's not, I interrupted softly. And you know it isn't. He looked away, scanning the room, as if hoping someone would rescue him from the moment. But no one was coming. Power has a strange way of rearranging loyalty in real time. I turned to leave, not wanting to drag this out. That's when my mother approached us, her expression a mix of confusion and concern. What's going on? She asked, glancing between Victor and me. Why does everyone look so tense? Victor forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Nothing, sweetheart. Just business talk. I took a breath. This was the part one hadn't planned. Mom, I said gently, we'll talk later. I promise. She studied my face, then Victor's. Something in her eyes shifted, a quiet realization that there was more happening than she had been told. She nodded slowly. All right, she said. Later. As she walked away, Victor's composure cracked. You had no right, he whispered sharply. You could have said something earlier. You let me make a fool of myself. I met his gaze. I didn't let you do anything. You chose every word you said tonight. He scoffed, but there was fear behind it now. So what is this? He asked. You want an apology. You want me to beg. I thought about that for a moment. I want respect, I said. Not just for me. For my mother. For anyone you think is smaller than you. Before he could respond, the DJ announced the next dance, and the music swelled again, pulling attention back to the celebration. Victor straightened his jacket, mask sliding back into place. We'll talk later, he said stiffly, then turned away. I left shortly after, hugging my mother tightly. She whispered, I'm proud of you, though she still didn't fully understand why. I told her I loved her and stepped out into the cool night air, the sounds of the wedding fading behind me. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls, messages, unknown numbers. Victor's name flashed across the screen more than once. I ignored them all. I had a board meeting to attend, one that had nothing to do with family drama and everything to do with the future of my company. At the office, the atmosphere was calm, professional. My team greeted me as usual, unaware of the emotional storm I had walked out of hours earlier. During the meeting, we reviewed quarterly reports, expansion plans, and staffing evaluations. When Hale Solutions came up on the screen, I listened carefully as my operations director spoke. There have been some internal issues, she said. Management morale is unstable. We may need to restructure. I nodded. Do what's necessary, I said. But be fair. No surprises. Fairness mattered to me. It always had. I didn't believe in revenge that crushed innocent people. But accountability. That was different. Later that day, Victor finally reached me through an email marked urgent. He requested a private meeting, his tone stiff but polite, stripped of the arrogance he usually carried. I agreed to see him, not out of obligation, but because unfinished things tend to rot if left alone. He arrived at my office that afternoon, looking smaller than he had at the wedding. No expensive jokes. No booming confidence. Just a man suddenly aware of how fragile his position really was. He sat across from me, hands clasped tightly. I didn't know, he began. If I had known who you were. That's the problem, I said quietly. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with basic decency. He exhaled slowly. I messed up, he admitted. I thought you were lazy. Unmotivated. I judged you. Yes, I said. You did. He nodded. I want to make things right. For your mother's sake, at least. I studied him for a long moment. Making things right doesn't start with me, I said. It starts with how you act when you think no one important is watching. He swallowed. Am I going to lose my job? The question hung between us. I could have ended him right there, with a signature, a phone call. He knew it. I knew it. But power used without principle becomes the same cruelty it claims to punish. That depends, I said. Not on me. On you. I laid out clear expectations. Professional conduct. Respect. No favoritism. No bullying. I told him his performance would be evaluated like anyone else's, nothing more, nothing less. He nodded quickly, agreeing to everything, gratitude and fear tangled together in his eyes. When he left, I felt no satisfaction, no thrill of victory. Just relief. Relief that the truth was no longer hidden. Relief that the silence I had carried for years was finally broken. That evening, my mother called me. Her voice was quiet. He told me, she said. About everything. I braced myself. And, there was a pause. I wish you had told me sooner, she said softly. But, I understand why you didn't. I never wanted to put you in the middle, I replied. I know, she said. And I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you more. Those words mattered more than anything Victor could ever say. As the call ended, I looked out over the city lights from my office window. I realized then that revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the moment when the person who underestimated you finally understands exactly who you are. And Victor was just beginning to understand. The weeks after the wedding passed quietly on the surface, but underneath, everything was changing. Victor showed up to work early now. He spoke less and listened more. The sharp jokes, the casual put-downs, the smug confidence he wore like armor, all of it slowly disappeared. People noticed. They always do when power shifts. I kept my distance. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. I had spent too many years shrinking myself to fit into rooms where I was never meant to be small. I wasn't going to start hovering now, watching him stumble. Accountability didn't require humiliation. At home, my mother seemed lighter, freer in a way I hadn't seen before. One evening, as we sat together drinking tea, she finally spoke the words she had been circling for weeks. I think I ignored things I shouldn't have, she said quietly, eyes fixed on her cup. The way he talked to you. The way he talked about people. I didn't interrupt. I let her finish. I told myself it wasn't serious, she continued. That he was just blunt. But I see now that I was wrong. I reached for her hand. You were trying to survive, I said gently. That doesn't make you a bad person. Tears welled in her eyes. I should have protected you. You raised me to protect myself, I replied. That counts. From that night on, our relationship shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No grand apologies or emotional speeches. Just honesty, slowly rebuilding what had been quietly worn down over the years. At work, the board approved a company-wide leadership review program. It wasn't aimed at Victor specifically, but he knew exactly what it meant. Performance, behavior, ethics, everything would be measured. Promotions would no longer come from charm or connections, but from results and conduct. Victor requested another meeting. This time, he didn't look afraid. He looked tired. I wanted you to hear this from me, he said, sitting across from my desk again. I've accepted an offer elsewhere. I studied his face. You don't have to leave, I said truthfully. You're meeting expectations now. I know, he nodded. But I think it's better if I start somewhere new. Somewhere I don't carry history. I respected that answer more than I expected to. My mother. I asked. I told her, he said quietly. Everything. Not just about you. About me. I leaned back, absorbing that. And, she deserves better than who I was, he admitted. Whether that's with me or without me. A few days later, he moved out. No shouting. No scenes. Just a quiet separation that felt heavier than any fight could have been. My mother cried, but there was relief in her tears. I forgot what peace felt like, she said one night. You didn't forget, I told her. You just weren't allowed to have it. Months passed. My company expanded into 2 new markets. I spoke at conferences, mentored young professionals, especially those who reminded me of myself, quiet, underestimated, carrying more weight than anyone could see. At one event, a young woman approached me after my talk. How did you do it? She asked. How did you not break when everyone treated you like you didn't matter? I thought about Victor. About the wedding. About all the moments before that night. I did break, I said honestly. I just didn't stay broken. She smiled, eyes shining, and I knew that answer would stay with her. On my mother's birthday, we hosted a small dinner. Just close friends. No pressure. No performance. As we laughed around the table, she raised her glass and looked at me. To my child, she said. Who taught me that strength doesn't always shout. I felt something warm settle in my chest. Not triumph. Not revenge. Peace. Later that night, as I cleaned up the dishes, my phone buzzed with a notification. A business article featuring my company. The headline praised innovation, leadership, vision. No mention of my past. No reference to where I came from. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Because the real victory wasn't exposing Victor at a wedding or watching his confidence crumble. It was building a life so solid that no one could ever make me feel small again. He had mocked me once, believing I was nothing. Now he knew better. And I didn't need to say another word.